Well, good evening and welcome to the Town Board of the Town of Austin work session for Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so we are back to Zoom meeting tonight because last week I tested positive for COVID-19 and I have a few more days before exiting quarantine into reality. Since we have a work session this evening, it was easy enough to return to our all virtual format. Later in tonight's meeting, we will discuss recent legislation adopted at the state level and how that impacts our meeting format moving forward. We are in all hands on deck planning mode for Earth Day, and we can't wait for this Saturday. You are not going to want to miss this one. It's the in-person return of the Green Austin Earth Day Festival, Saturday, April 23rd from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We invite everyone to spend the day by the Hudson River, celebrating Mother Earth and learning how to reduce your impact on the environment while having a lot of fun. There will be delicious food, hands-on activities for all ages, eco demonstrations, and all sorts of vendors, artists and artisans, vegetarian and vegan fare, craft beer, food foraging, textile music, textile music on the brain, textile recycling, e-waste drive, drum and ukulele circles, kids activity zones, and live music, not live recycling. Well, I guess that's live too, all day, and much, much more. Before I get into the rest of the fun stuff, a few safety messages about the Earth Day Festival. There will be limited parking at the waterfront on Saturday, and event attendees are encouraged to take advantage of the free shuttle that will be bringing people to and from free municipal parking areas in the heart of downtown Austin. Parking at the event will be limited to those who require handicap accessible parking or who are vendors. We will be sharing out parking maps and tips via social media over the coming days, so please keep an eye out for them and also feel free to share with friends who you know may be coming into town. The extra bonus of using the free shuttle is you get to start and end your Earth Day adventure on Main Street, so you can grab a second lunch at Good Choice Kitchen or a new book or fun toy from Hudson Valley Books for Humanity or Penny and Ting or Melita's. Make an Austin day of it. The town and village of Austin will have a double booth showcasing a few exciting initiatives, including the Austin Shoreline Revitalization Project, or Phase 2 of the Austin Climate Adaptive Design Studio, and our food scraps recycling program. You will be able to purchase a composting kit or pre-order one now for pickup at the festival at austincomposts.org. And you can sign up for our second annual Compost Give Back Day, which will be held on Friday, May 6th and Saturday, May 7th at Cedar Lane Park. We will also share information out about our proposed legislation prohibiting balloon releases, which we'll be talking about this evening, and a quick guide to the town's environmental regulations, which was prepared for the town by our Environmental Advisory Committee, as well as directing people to learn more about our draft comprehensive plans, Sustainable Austin. The village will also have information about Project Mover, which aims to bring e-bikes to Austin, and the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. We hear there may be a chance to take a spin on an e-bike yourself. Please stop by and say hi on Saturday.
Here.
We will be set up right next to our friends at Hudson Valley 511 New York Rideshare, who will have information about how to choose a sustainable mode of transportation for commuting this Earth Day and every day. Get a head start on your Earth Day pledge by visiting the Austin Community Center this week through Wednesday, April 27th, to visit the 511 New York Rideshare kiosk and become a 511 New York Rideshare member so you can learn how to green your commute. Also, in what we are going to call the Municipal Corner at Earth Day, Sustainable Westchester will be near us, sharing information about such programs as grid rewards energy smart homes and businesses, community choice aggregation, community solar, and many more. You should have received in the mail this week a postcard inviting you to join the Westchester Earth Month Challenge by signing up for Grid Rewards. Grid Rewards is an easy and fun way to actually earn money for your smart energy behavior. It's literally as easy as flipping a switch. Learn more at sustainablewestchester.org/grid rewards, or plan on making a stop to the booth at Earth Day. Make sure you follow at Green Ossining and at Town of Ossining on social media, and gear up for what will definitely be a fantastic day at our beautiful Hudson River. That's it for my announcements. Are there any other announcements from my colleagues about anything other than Earth Week, Earth Month, or Earth Day?
Okay, on Friday, April 29th, Scott Craven will be speaking at the Ossining Boat and Canoe Club on topics to do with his new book about Croton Point and the indigenous people who used to live there. So it's free and open to everybody. I believe the doors open at 7 and the talk starts at 7:30, but keep your eyes out for the flyer. And as you all know, he's an amazing, engaging speaker. So should be a good time.
I think he's going to be speaking at the Jug Tavern annual meeting this year as well. I think that's coming up in May. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, any other announcements from any of my board colleagues? And seeing none, I will move right into our work session agenda. And first up, we have our Senior Nutrition Program Site Director, Lynn Muller, with a departmental report. Welcome, Lynn.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Sorry, I just got here. I had a little trouble logging on, but I made it.
Perfect timing. You missed most of my announcements. You should be very happy.
Sorry. You'll have to call me tomorrow and fill me in.
Okay.
Well, senior center's up and running. We've got everybody coming in. They're having a good time. We've got a few events planned coming up in the months coming. Next month, we're going to Croton Point Park for Salute to Seniors. They serve food, have music, and provide a lot of information for the seniors. So it's a nice time to get them outside and get some information, enjoy the day. We'll be having a Mother's Day lunch on May 10th. In June, we're going to the county puts on a swim party day down at Saxon Woods Pool. And we close the center for the day and take all the seniors with us and go down there and enjoy that. It's really, they haven't had it in a couple of years due to COVID. So we're looking forward to get back to doing that. Regular activities still, we have bingo and chair yoga, line dancing, arts and crafts, shopping at ShopRite. We're hoping to get a Tai Chi class maybe in a few months. We're still working on that. But other than that, everything's going along as usual, and we're looking forward to good things coming.
And our seniors have been staying healthy?
Yes, we really have been very blessed. We've had a few cases of COVID with our seniors, but they've all pulled through and been okay. We're not quite back to capacity like we were before COVID, but it's getting there. And I think the more and more the mandates go down and more people are vaccinated and getting through all the new variants, they'll feel more comfortable to come back in. So we're hoping for that.
Great. And also the, I assume many of them are getting now their second booster or their fourth.
Yeah, a lot of them have been getting their boosters and
great,
doing everything they can to stay safe. And it's been good. We've been very lucky.
You have been.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Thanks. I know that you guys have a very dedicated staff and we're very appreciative of all the good work. And I know that the seniors are too. And I'm sure that they appreciate being back to being able to socialize for a little bit. So
they do.
Hopefully we can keep maintaining their health, their good health.
We're trying.
Yeah,
I also just want to note, while we have Lynn here, we did do another bid for our caterer for the senior nutrition program. We did have one bid. It's our current caterer, the caterer that we've worked with for a number of years. The price did go up. We did anticipate that, so we did budget a little bit more this year, or going into 2022 for an anticipated price increase. But I think this caterer has really worked well with us during COVID and helped when we needed frozen meals and meals packaged differently, when we had staff who couldn't come into work and all sorts of things. So provided everything looks good with the caterer's insurance, which we're just going to take a quick look at with our insurance carrier this week, we will have a resolution for the board to consider next week to approve a new contract with this caterer.
That'd be great. Yeah, I appreciate
Great.
that.
We're also hopeful that our new kitchen appliances will hit the delivery will be delivered in sometime in the not too distant future. And as everybody knows, also we've been waiting with bated breath for that bus. So hopefully we'll get that bus
Hopefully
over
soon.
the
We
summer.
did receive the stove.
Yeah,
We're
some of
hoping
the
that too,
appliances.
so-
Oh, good news.
Yeah, they
Okay, so
started coming through.
great. All right, good news. Okay, so any other questions for Lynn from my board colleagues? No? All right, wonderful.
Okay,
Lynn,
good.
thank you so much for taking the time this evening. We always appreciate it. And I'm glad you were able to zoom in.
Thank you. Okay, take care, all.
Okay, bye-bye. So next we have our police chief. Chief, are you there? Kevin Sylvester with us tonight to discuss our proposed local law prohibiting balloon and lantern releases. We specifically need to discuss the fines associated with violating this local law and enforcement. So we are glad to have the chief on tonight. Councilor Donna, do you want to briefly walk through the law and highlight the pieces that we will need some input on, which we're hoping the chief may be able to help us with?
Would you like me to share my screen so everyone can look at the law?
I feel like it's short enough that will be helpful.
All right.
It's very succinct, I would like to say, in a very positive way.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
So this started as initially a discussion about banning balloon releases because of the environmental impacts from them obviously returning back to the ground and the impacts on the wildlife and litter and whatnot. So when we had a work session on this 2 weeks ago, it was discussed to add the concept of sky lanterns, which are, I guess, most comparable to a mini hot air balloon, where they have a flame in there. So they will elevate and then eventually come back down. So what we've done since the last work session is I incorporated sky lanterns into the local law, as well as a definition of sky lanterns shall mean any device that is comprised of paper, fabric, or other material pulled over a frame with a small candle, fuel cell, or similar heating source with the frame, within the frame. And that was a definition that I took partially from another local law that Ulster County had enacted a few years ago. There are a couple of exceptions to this law in that balloons or sky lanterns released for scientific or meteorological purposes on behalf of a governmental agency or pursuant to a governmental contract, manned hot air balloons that are recovered after launching, balloons or sky lanterns intended to remain indoors, and accidental releases for persons 13 years of age or younger. And then one of the other things that the board had discussed at its last work session was a potential penalty, because if you're going to have a law prohibiting something, you have to have a penalty for it to be enforced. And so my sense from the consensus of the board was to do it on a per unit basis per se, $50 for each balloon or sky lantern released. Obviously, the police will be the ones that will ultimately be responsible for enforcing this law. And so I'm happy to have the chief here and have his input on this law and to provide guidance to the board in terms of enforcement with respect to the fine that's currently being proposed and just enforcement generally.
we turn it over to you, Chief, for your comments.
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen so that everyone can see each other?
That's fine with me unless Chief, you want it up there. It's up to you.
No, I think that's fine. You can take it down if you're ready. Evening, everybody. So a couple things on this. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize that this is something that's a relatively, I don't want to say rare, but it's not an everyday occurrence that we have people releasing balloons. A few times a year, we have people come down and do this, and certainly important to regulate. Nonetheless, I think that what I always advise is to pick something that's functional and that'll work for those circumstances. So I think realistically what the board has to realize is that the hope for this, I believe, is as a preventive measure and not necessarily enforcement. If this goes well, the law will encourage people not to do this. They'll follow the law. Voluntary compliance is always our objective. That said, there may be times when people decide to do this anyway. I think that a per balloon basis makes a lot of sense here in conversation. I think functionally it becomes a little bit problematic. A couple of different reasons. Number one, we do wear body cameras, but zooming in and counting the number of balloons and depending on how far away they go, they do fly off relatively quickly. And I see some smiles, so you can probably figure out how complicated and how quickly this is. Simplicity is our friend. I would recommend a flat fee. For the number of times we're going to have this and however many balloons there are, just putting a fee on it, I think, is probably your easiest way to do this. The next thing becomes if a body camera doesn't get activated in time and then we can't prove the number of balloons that are there. So, simply saying, look, there were these balloons, they went off, and whatever that fine is. Keep in mind, Chrissy's right, we do enforcement. However, we don't issue fines. We issue appearance tickets. The court's going to adjudicate these things. So that fine's going to get handed down by a judge somewhere. So it may not be necessarily what we plan for it to be anyway. And that's another reason that I would recommend just a flat fee so that it makes it an easier negotiation. But a couple things to how this plays out. I would highly recommend some sign somewhere. I am not a big fan of a lot of signs. It may be added to another sign that's already existing in order not to have more signs, but just something there because again, this is a preventative measure, I think is the best way for this to be handled. My expectation is that when there are calls for people releasing balloons, we'll certainly send police officers like all other calls in the parks. I would imagine in most cases, it'll be more of an educational type thing, informing people that they can't do this. And in most cases, something like this, people will comply. In the event that somebody willfully violates the law, we'll issue the tickets where they have to be. But I don't suspect we're going to have an awful lot of balloon violations in our court. That's my hope.
All right. And is $100 something that sounds reasonable for that?
For a lot of violations, 100 is the number. The only other thing that I would suggest for consideration is putting a higher number, knowing that oftentimes courts will plea things down. So if you put a larger number on there, expecting that it's going to be some fraction of that, that's also feasible. But something in that ballpark is what I would recommend.
Maybe
What happens sometimes in the code is it's an escalation based upon the number of offenses. So it's relatively unlikely, I think, that this will happen on multiple occasions if someone, if it happens the first time, but you could do $100 for the first offense, $250 for a second offense within 3 years or something like that.
All right, or we could start at 250 because he's right. The courts will probably knock it down.
I hope not to ever in my life write 2 tickets for balloon releases. Once.
Yeah.
We also hope that. And Councilman Fields Tweel, you have your hand raised very politely.
Yes, in case anyone is questioning, well, what is the alternative? What are we going to do instead? While I was on vacation last week, I found something in a store that I just wanted to share in case people don't understand why we're doing this. There are alternatives, so I wanted to just show everybody. This is called flying prayer paper, and it says on the back, think of a special prayer, and you can use this. It basically shows you on the back. It is something that you light up and it disintegrates like immediately. And this is something that is safer, more environmental, option. So in case, I don't want people to, it says, write it, light it, watch it fly. That's what it says on here. So in case anyone is upset about the loss of memorializing certain situations with balloons and whatnot, there are other options available.
And I'm very happy that you brought that up. I am still not sure that we want to encourage people lighting things on fire. But I would suggest that Councilwoman Feldman has some options that she's planning to share at the booth, as I mentioned earlier in the announcements, at Earth Day. So I know that you've also been doing some research, Councilwoman Feldman. I don't know if you wanted to mention any of those other things as well.
Right, so that is actually one of the options. That is the flying wish paper. And
Okay.
it disintegrates before it gets a foot in the air. It disintegrates before it's gone anywhere. So it's not, doesn't seem to be a fire hazard.
Okay,
There
good.
are, often there are candlelight vigils where people are holding a very small candle. We have found seed impregnated paper. Yeah, so it's a very small little, here, you want to light one? No. Kidding.
Okay.
We found a seed impregnated memorial paper where you can, write a note to your loved one either on this paper or the other paper and plant it and have wildflowers grow in their honor. You can release bubbles if you're trying to draw attention to a new business or something of that like, where people often use balloons or having a party. We have ribbon streamers that will, wave and be just as colorful and exciting, and kids can play with streamers just as much as they play with balloons, but they're unlikely to let go and fly away. So there are a lot of different options of things that we can do, and we'll have some examples at the booth.
Great. Okay, so is there any other comment from the chief about the actual very simple proposed Jack bill here?
No, I
Legislation.
mean, look, I think overall it's a good concept. It's just, we struggle with lots of rules that create lots of signs. So hopefully we can find a functional way to educate people. We'll put some
Mhm.
messaging out and things like that. And I think that should address most of it. And, from time to time, if we get questions from people, we'll answer those. But this should be relatively straightforward.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to understand from the board,
Mhm.
you'd like to start with a $250 flat fee fine for violations. Would you like to see any sort of escalation?
Can we revisit it at a certain point? Or
You can
after?
always amend the law, absolutely.
Yes, I mean, I would just say, we're not really trying to break anybody's bank here. We're just trying to enforce, educate, and tell them we're trying to get to the final solution of pollution. So I think starting out at a reasonable rate, and then if it becomes taken advantage of, we can revisit this in a year or so.
Councilman Minish, we're going to ask you to put together the wrap version of that, please.
Oh,
the
sorry.
solution to pollution, okay? And then hopefully that'll be another, tool that we can use in the toolbox to educate.
And realistically, I mean, our police department does usually educate, the first time educates the person, it's not straight to enforcement. It's, hey, did you know? On almost all counts. So.
Absolutely. I don't necessarily disagree. I just, to revise the law in accordance with what the board would like to see.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that 250 sounds good. Is that good, everybody? Going once, going twice, just 250, no escalation. And it can be revisited should there be a time and a need to do so. And hopefully that time and that need will never happen. It'll be effective right out of the box. All right. So great. So, and I think we had already called for the public hearing, which will be at our next legislative session. So with that, I think we're going to close our discussion. Work session discussion. Thank you, Chief.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night. Next up, we're talking about one of the favorite subjects that I speak with my municipal official colleagues about on a regular basis, the open meetings law. In the state budget, the state legislature adopted legislation relating to virtual meetings in the open meetings law. Throughout COVID, we have been able to hold completely virtual meetings like the one that we have tonight through emergency orders, but the legislature took more permanent action to address protocol for holding virtual meetings. Councilor Donna, would you like to explain to us the new provisions in the state law and next steps for the board? So should we choose to want to adopt some of the necessary new provisions?
Yeah, so just to take a step back, because Supervisor, you mentioned what we've been doing during COVID. Before COVID, the law stated that if you were going to have meetings virtually or via video conferencing or phone calls, you needed to notice it accordingly with the location where every board member would be attending, and the public needed to have the right and opportunity to attend at those meetings. Once COVID-19 happened, there were executive orders that were put into effect that did allow completely virtual meetings. They have been, that law has been extended and is still in effect, this time through the state legislature. This was done last year and then continued in Chapter 1 of the laws of 2022 earlier this year. And that said that as long as there is a state of emergency related to COVID-19 in effect, that the board can continue to hold these meetings remotely. And that state of emergency is still in effect. It was actually just renewed by the governor. She can only do it for 30 days at a time, but it was up on the 15th and it was renewed for another 30 days. So separate and apart from what this new law that I'll get to in a second, as long as the state of emergency remains in effect, boards can continue to act completely remotely. So now what the new law says is it gives a 60-day period of time separate and apart from the state of emergency. So say the state of emergency was lifted tomorrow, the boards for 60 days could still operate remotely if they so chose. But what this also does is it puts a different mechanism in effect for video conferencing meetings, which is different and not quite as flexible as what we've grown accustomed to over the last few years. So what this requires is that a quorum of the board, so for a 5-person board like yourselves, 3 people do have to attend in person, and they have to be in a place that's handicap accessible, that the public can attend. And then if based upon, I just want to use the proper terminology, extraordinary circumstances is what the law says. So basically illness, if you're caring for a loved one, if there's some sort of disability or for some reason a board member cannot be present physically, then they can attend via video conferencing. If that is the case, then the public has to also be able to attend remotely as well. So the public, if you incorporate the video conferencing concept for one member of the board due to these extraordinary circumstances, then you need the public aspect to also be available. And this has to happen by local law. So the board actually affirmatively has to incorporate this concept into its code in order to authorize this to happen. So really from a practical perspective, the only thing that's changing from what was previously allowed under the law before COVID-19 is that under extenuating circumstances, a board member could not attend remotely and be able to not have to notice their actual physical location or allow members of the public to attend at that location. But it
Also, wasn't it true that you couldn't vote if you were remote in the past?
No,
No, that wasn't true. If it was noticed, you could still vote.
no, you could hold a meeting completely remotely. You just, every board member's location would have to be noticed and people would have to be able to attend.
I think that actually changed over the last 10 years. Yes, now I'm thinking about it. It
Do
did.
they define what extenuating circumstances are? Is it COVID-19 related?
They gave examples: disability, illness, caregiving responsibilities, or any other significant or unexpected factor or event which precludes the member's physical attendance at such meetings. So just, if you have a conflict or if you're out of town, that's not going to fly under this.
Well, who are you proving it to? Just out of curiosity. I mean, are they the open meetings police? I mean, I guess the public if they want to complain about it. Okay.
Well, I mean, that's what the law says. I mean,
I think
I guess you could just notice your address then.
absolutely.
Even if it's not
you can
extenuating,
always,
so it doesn't matter.
yes. And the Committee on Open Government did put out guidance on this. And I did compare the law as what's intended to be amended in what currently exists. And the provisions regarding if you're holding a meeting via video conferencing, then you have to notice the locations and the ability of people to attend a location. That's going to remain on the books. So that's not changing. It's not taking away what already existed. It's just giving this other option. But in practicality, it's not really that much of an option unless it's really under circumstances where the person probably wouldn't be able to attend anyway.
Well, I mean, just for example, you know, last week I couldn't, I had COVID, so I couldn't attend the meeting. And well, we had a couple board, we didn't have a quorum. We couldn't have actually held the meeting the way we did last week if we hadn't been under this emergency order, because we only had 2 people who were able to attend in person. So that would have not worked for us. We could have had the same meeting and just noticed where we were, but then we'd have to also allow the public in, which wouldn't have really worked for me for, you know, allowing the public into my home with COVID. I don't think that would have been a good idea. So, you know, I don't know, it's a little challenging, but I think that it's worth considering adopting just to give ourselves the option should they be needed. I mean, I think my feeling would be that we're going to try to continue to hold hybrid meetings for the public purpose, so that and also for guests to be able to zoom in, because I think it makes it a little bit easier for presentations and for other things. But I don't know how anybody else on the board feels about that. So I'm curious, you know, to hear if you think it's worthwhile moving forward with adopting.
Does this apply to work sessions as well? The same guidelines?
It's any quorum of the board. Yes. So it would apply to work sessions also.
And our land use boards as well, other boards of the town that operate under open meetings law.
And we have had some people, I mean, you know, again, it looks like we have at least another 90 days based on what you're saying, Councilor Donna, right? I mean, we have at least through May 16th plus that extra 60 days you said.
No, so there are parallel tracks. So the law says, and the previous law allows for remote meetings to continue as long as the state of emergency is in effect.
Correct.
The law we're talking about tonight that was passed as part of the budget on April 8th, approximately,
Yes.
gave 60 days. So let's say it was the state of emergency was lifted tomorrow, you still have those 60 days to get your affairs in order, so to speak.
So
However,
6 days.
if the state of emergency remains in effect for 2 years, then we can continue to operate under those rules for 2 years. The problem is, as I said earlier, the state of emergency has to be renewed every 30 days. And so you can't really plan ahead for that.
Correct.
I also just want to note that, you know, we were on this call earlier in the week with, you know, other municipal officials in the county, and there was some discussion about some groups, you know, the Westchester Municipal Officials Association or some other groups that get together and talk about these things to maybe develop some sort of model legislation that that municipalities can consider. So that's also something that we can kind of wait a little bit, because we do know we at least have these 60 days to consider.
And also just to be clear is that this isn't like the cannabis legislation. So this isn't, if you don't adopt the law in 60 days, you're out of time.
Right.
Can't incorporate these procedures until you adopt it. But there's nothing that says do it in 60 days, otherwise it's no longer an option.
Got it. I mean, I still would say we might want to move forward with trying to do something, because you know, just my particular situation last week, like I really thought we were farther out of the woods than we were with COVID. And now, you know, we're seeing this uptick, seeing, you know, people getting sick, and it just puts, you know, our ability to show up in person at a place, you know, puts us at a disadvantage. So, you know, to be able to continue to conduct business remotely seems like an advantage for us to be able to, you know, have a functioning government. So I would think that it would be something that we should move forward, you know, more quickly than not, just to have it in place. And again, hopefully we don't need it, but it would be there. So I don't know how the board feels. I mean, we also have this other issue, which is that we adopted a resolution noticing meetings through April 26th as hybrid in-person virtual meetings, mostly because we had the comp plan public hearing and we wanted to make sure people could come in person. We've only really had, I think, one person take advantage of that so far. Everybody else has been happy to attend remotely. And, I think probably in some ways had more participation because of that. So since we are also potentially closing our public hearing at the next, for the comp plan at the next meeting, I think we should also consider returning to the all virtual meetings in May if everybody is up for that, for as long as we can, basically, until the executive order is lifted. And meanwhile, on a parallel track, as Councilor Donna mentioned, work on this other legislation.
What I would just say briefly, I don't want to interrupt the input of the board, but there's no harm in doing this. It doesn't change anything. It's just an additional option.
Correct.
It's not the option that I think, people may have expected it to be in light of what we've been doing for the last 2 years.
No, definitely not. I think we were looking for something better.
So
Yeah, I agree. I think we should do it. And I would say it's also post or current COVID now, people not wearing masks. It's not just COVID, flu is spreading, all these other
Yeah.
things. People were so
Exactly.
insulated for 2 years and now everybody's getting sick with something. So I definitely
Absolutely.
support it.
yeah, I don't have a problem going forward with it. I think it's a little more restrictive than I would want it to be, and I hope they change that, Do I need a note from my doctor? Just wondering. But yeah, I mean, move forward, and with as many options as we have, the more better.
So just to speak to what Councilwoman Feldman said, this law is scheduled to expire and be deemed repealed on July 1st, 2024. And it's been directed that the Committee on Open Government provide basically a report and review to the legislature and the powers that be in state government by January 1st, 2024, as to how this is operating and potential alternatives going forward. So it will be revisited in the next 2 years.
Okay. Okay, so shall we direct Council Donna to either work together with anybody who's working on a template, or, draft local law for, a model local law, either to do that or just to come up with something that works within the context of what we've been given from the legislature. Does that make sense? Everybody's good? Thumbs up. Okay, great. We'll do that. And then are you also good with going back to all virtual after the 26th for May until we can't anymore? Yes. Okay, fantastico. Next up, our grant rating consultants at Millennium Strategies have been hard at work getting grant applications out so that we can offset local taxpayer dollars for special projects and programs. I'm going to ask Victoria Caffarelli, our amazing budget director and grant supervisor extraordinaire, to give us a little update on recent grant applications and awards, as well as grants on the horizon.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I guess I'll start with two projects that are not new to the board, but we are trying to seek funding wherever we can for these projects. The first being the Route 133 bike lane, which we've been talking about for quite some time. That is quite a large project. We do still have a pending grant application out there for the TAP program through its federal dollars through the New York State DOT. We have not heard yet if we've gotten that funding, but we know that we're going to need more money if we actually do want to bring this to fruition as the Cadillac route of the Millwood Austin and Go plan. So currently our congressional representatives, our Congressman Mondaire Jones, as well as Senator Chuck Schumer, have appropriations requests out there where communities can put in, organizations, municipalities can put in requests for community projects funding. And so we have submitted requests to both of those legislative offices for additional funding for the Route 133 bike lane. Last year, we put in a similar request and we did make it into some phase of federal transportation bill. So we're hoping that perhaps this year, with a little bit more work done on the engineering that we did as part of our TAP grant in the fall, that we might be a little bit more successful. So that is out there and pending.
I'll just mention that yesterday we were on the county call, and Senator Schumer was on, and there was a lot of other opportunities that also seem like they might, you know, be a good fit for this particular, because there are a lot of transportation, alternative mobility grants out there. So, you know, we may be dropping this into a couple of different places because it seems like a good fit that we're far along with. Because we did, you know, do have drawings from the state and their input and their support, as well as these other two, our neighboring municipalities. So we'll continue to see if we can push that forward.
And
Sorry.
a lot of really great support from community organizations as well. You know, as
Absolutely.
part of these grant applications, we've gotten letters of support from a lot of organizations. And so we're very appreciative of the general community support for the project.
Right. And as this Project Mover proposed grant for the village moves forward, you know, one of the pieces of that is that's going to be important is actually making sure that there's safe roadways for electric bikes.
Yeah.
And other alternative modes of transportation. So.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So that if the village is successful with their application, and I think they're submitting in the summer, the first phase of that project will involve e-bikes in the village of Ossining, but in the following year would expand to the town of Ossining. So if the village is successful with that grant application to NYSERDA, we will also benefit from it in the coming years. So that's exciting too. I didn't have that on my list, but that's a very exciting one as well. The other is for Lewis Engle Park, we did submit a number of applications under the Community Development Block Grant Program last spring. We were awarded for the two projects, two phases of relocating the bathroom facilities at Lewis Engle Park. The other two applications, the county decided to not award funding for in the first round of applications there. And we learned of an opportunity through actually Lowe's for programs for construction type projects. And so we shared this with our grant writers, and they thought that the project to reconstruct the fishing piers at Lewis Engle Park might be a good fit for this opportunity from Lowe's. So we have that grant application in, so that might be an interesting source of funding to improve those fishing piers. And it will also tie into the CAD studio, the shoreline revitalization project that we're going to be talking about at Earth Day. So a lot of opportunities going on at Engle Park still. We did also submit, staying at Engle Park, we did submit under the Village of Ossining Downtown Revitalization Initiative, the $10 million that has been allocated to the Village of Ossining for downtown revitalization, economic development. We submitted for to create a performance space at Lewis Engle Park, and they have asked us for a little bit more information about that. So we're hopeful that you know, we will be successful either getting funding through that program or making sure that it's noted as a priority project or some significant project as part of the DRI plan, and then we can seek additional state funding elsewhere if it doesn't quite fit into the $10 million, because $10 million sounds like a lot, but it goes pretty fast, I think. And then
the idea for that is, as the bathrooms move, we would actually be able to create a performance space, which isn't going to be completely enclosed, but would be a covered space that would be able to endure at least a little bit of the elements. Right now, we're always challenged with bands getting set up, and then we have like a little squall come through, and we have all this, you know, high-priced equipment out there. It doesn't mean that, you know, everybody's going running away. Like they may just, you know, duck and cover for a few minutes until the rain passes. But when we have instruments and things like that, sometimes it means that, you know, we have to call the show, and we're really not able to put any kind of a cover on the current stage. It's just not built. It wasn't really built to sustain something on top of it in the wind and the other elements that, you know, we have at the riverfront. So looking for a sustainable, maybe even potentially floodable performance space that would again go with our sort of CAD design phase, and also offer more audience space is something that I think would ultimately service the public very, very well at that park. Okay, go ahead.
NYSERDA put out a very interesting call or it's really just an opportunity that we could apply for, that is giving funding to municipalities for two interesting things relating to building code enforcement and building department. The first is third-party support, which is basically they're looking for municipalities to kind of be pilot communities for utilizing third-party inspectors and consultants to help with code compliance. And the idea is, this is under the sort of clean energy communities, sustainability route, where they're looking for communities who are, doing New York Stretch and New York Stretch codes, which is the enhanced environmental codes, and making sure that building projects are more sustainable, more energy efficient. And so they're looking for communities to be pilots of this program. And we learned about it through NYSERDA. Our building inspector also learned about it through some of his training, and we both came together and we're like, we have to do this, because basically by applying for it, or you just have to submit saying that you're interested, and the amount of money they will give you is $50,000 to test this out. You don't necessarily have to use it for something specific to the building department. You can use it for any energy efficient projects or any sustainability projects in the community. So we put in a letter of interest, and then we will have to determine how we'd like to spend that $50,000, which is exciting. The other part of that program is for advancing code compliance technology. And this is something that we've been talking about for some time now, about implementing an online permitting system for our building department. We've kind of shopped around, we've learned about a couple of different companies, and our building department is interested, but we haven't really quite pulled the trigger yet on one company or another. And it's actually good, because just like with this code compliance, the NYSERDA will basically give you $75,000 to sign on to say that you would like to implement the online building permit software. The only thing that we'll have to do is we will have to go through an RFP process, which is something that we don't always do for software packages, because we often try to use the same technology that we've used before, things that we're familiar with. It's often a lot of sole source vendors or professional services vendors for these sorts of things, but we're hopeful that it will also help us get a little bit of a better price, because we were having some issues there. And then we'll be able to use the $75,000 towards the building permit software, which we've budgeted for a couple of years and haven't spent. So it's pretty exciting that they have this opportunity that we kind of are jokingly calling it free money, but it's not. Obviously, you have to participate in these programs, but they're programs that we're interested in participating in anyway. And so it's a great opportunity that aligns very closely with things that we already have going on. So that's one we're very excited about. And we did submit a letter of interest. So now we're kind of in the hopper to start this program. It's a first come, first serve program. So it was really important for us to get that in sooner rather than later, so we can get our spot in this pretty lucrative program. So it's great that NYSERDA is providing this funding for municipalities to improve their operations, and that way they can make sure that buildings are more sustainable and people are complying with these new energy codes. So those are the kind of current applications that we have going on. We are gearing up for the consolidated funding application, which will be in the summer, and that requires a lot of planning in advance. So we are going to start having those conversations with our grant writers, and also kind of putting fine touches on our capital plan for the next year, so we can determine where we might want to seek grant funding to offset some project costs that we have going on.
And simultaneously, we're looking at a bond for this year. So again,
Yes.
a bond, right? That's separate from our grants, but and we have a lot of other grants that are sort of in the works that you've heard about before, and they're at various stages of execution, and hopefully we'll have more information for you about some of those in the not too distant future. Does anybody have any questions about any of these or suggestions? All right.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that is our work session for this evening. If I could have a motion to adjourn to executive session for advice of counsel, I would be much obliged.
So moved.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Wonderful. Thank you all so very much. We'll be back with a hybrid meeting next week for our legislative session on Tuesday, April 26th, when we will also have the continuation of our public hearing on the town's draft comprehensive plan, among others. We're looking forward to seeing you then, and hopefully at the Earth Day Festival on Saturday too. Have a wonderful night, everybody.